The fluorescent lights in Dr. Garner's office buzzed, casting a cold, clinical glow over the room. I sat rigidly in the chair, clutching my purse as Dr. Garner flipped through Ray's medical file. Normally, a checkup brought a reassuring routine, a predictable rhythm that hinted at normalcy. But today, that comfort was nowhere to be found. The air crackled with a palpable tension, and Dr. Garner's frown deepened with each page he turned. Ray, seated beside me, was unnervingly silent. His usual reserve seemed to have hardened into an oppressive stillness. His gaze was fixed on an invisible point on the floor, and I felt a chasm widening between us, swallowing every thread that once connected us. Dr. Garner finally closed the file with a soft thud and met my eyes. His gaze bore an urgency that quickened my pulse. "Stella," he said, his voice steady but heavy with unspoken weight. "I need to speak with you privately." My heart pounded. I glanced at Ray, who looked up for the first time, his expression unreadable. He gave a curt nod, stood, and left the room without a word. The door clicked shut, and the small office seemed to contract around me, suffocating. I faced Dr. Garner, struggling to keep my voice steady. "What's going on, doctor? Is Ray okay?" Dr. Garner leaned forward, his fingers laced together on the desk. "Stella, I wish I could offer reassurances, but I have concerns that extend beyond Ray's physical health." An icy knot formed in my stomach. "What concerns?" He hesitated, choosing his words with care. "I've been seeing Ray for a while, and there are troubling patterns I've noticed. I wanted to wait until I had more information before bringing this up, but I believe you need to know the truth, for your own safety." The word safety sent a shiver down my spine. I leaned closer, whispering, "What truth?" Dr. Garner's eyes softened with a blend of sympathy and resolve. "Ray has a history, a criminal past he's concealed from you. About 10 years ago, he was arrested for fraud. He has a history of manipulating people, even faking illnesses for sympathy and financial gain." I stared at him, stunned. "Fraud? Faking illnesses? Are you saying Ray is lying about his depression?" The doctor's silence was heavy, his gaze probing my reaction. "I can't say for certain. But given his past, it's possible. The symptoms he's exhibiting, his withdrawal, his claims of exhaustion, they could be real or another deception." A sharp pang of disbelief pierced through me. "No. This can't be true. Ray's been struggling so much lately. He's lost weight, he can barely get out of bed. How could he be faking that?" Dr. Garner's expression softened further. "I understand it's hard to believe. But I've seen cases like this before. People like Ray can be very convincing. That's why I had to warn you. I care about your well-being and want you to be prepared." The words "prepared" echoed hollowly in my mind. How could the man I loved, shared my life with, be capable of such deceit? "I need to talk to him," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I need to hear it from him." Dr. Garner nodded solemnly. "I understand. But Stella, be cautious. If Ray is deceiving you, he might try to manipulate you further. Don't let your emotions cloud your judgment. Protect yourself." I swallowed hard, the gravity of his words sinking in as I stood up, my legs trembling. "Thank you, doctor. I need to go." He stood as well, his expression compassionate. "If you need anything, support, advice, don't hesitate to reach out." I nodded mechanically and turned towards the door, my mind a whirlwind of confusion and fear. The walk back to the waiting room felt interminable, each step a struggle against the rising tide of doubt that threatened to overwhelm me. Ray sat in the corner, his gaze still fixed on the floor. As I approached, he looked up, his face an unreadable mask. For a moment, the silence between us was a heavy shroud. "Everything okay?" he asked, his voice flat and devoid of emotion. I hesitated, searching his face for any hint of the man I once knew. All I saw was a facade, calm, composed, and infuriatingly inscrutable. "Ray," I began, my voice trembling despite my efforts to remain calm, "Dr. Garner. He told me things. About your past. About what you've done. His expression remained unchanged. If he was surprised, he didn't show it. He leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. And what exactly did he tell you? I forced myself to maintain eye contact. He said you were arrested for fraud. That you've lied about being sick before. That you might be lying now. Ray let out a slow breath, a bitter smile curling at his lips. So that's what this is about. I stepped closer, my heart racing. Is it true, Ray? Did you lie to me? Are you lying now? The silence stretched, heavy and oppressive. Finally, he spoke, his voice cold and detached. Does it matter? The words hit me like a physical blow. I recoiled, my voice rising in anguish. What do you mean, does it matter? Of course, it matters. Our entire life together. If it's all been a lie, then yes, it matters. He shrugged, his eyes dark and unreadable. Maybe it started as a lie. Maybe I thought I could fool you, fool everyone. But things change, Stella. People change. Or maybe they don't. Maybe they just get better at hiding who they really are. My heart ached. Ray, I need to know the truth. Please. Just tell me. Are you still the man I married, or have I been living with a stranger? For a brief moment, something flickered in his eyes, regret or sorrow, perhaps, but it was quickly masked by his usual detachment. I don't know who I am anymore, Stella. And I don't think you do either. Tears stung my eyes, but I blinked them back, struggling to maintain composure. I couldn't break down now, not in front of him. Not when everything was falling apart. I want to help you, Ray, I whispered, my voice trembling. But I can't do that if you keep shutting me out. He looked at me for a long moment, then shook his head, his gaze distant. You can't help someone who doesn't want to be helped. The finality in his words was crushing. The bond we once shared seemed irreparably severed by deceit and darkness. The man I had loved was gone, replaced by a stranger. Without another word, I turned and walked out of the waiting room, leaving Ray behind. Stepping into the cool autumn air, the reality of the situation hit me like a tidal wave, and I struggled to breathe. My marriage, my life, everything I believed in, had been an illusion. Now, I was left to confront the shattered fragments of my world. I didn't know where to go or what to do next. But one thing was certain, I couldn't go back. Not now, not ever. The drive home was a blur of confusion and dread. My knuckles were white as I gripped the steering wheel, but my thoughts were miles away, tangled in a web of betrayal and unanswered questions. The world outside passed by in a muted gray haze, reflecting the storm of doubt swirling in my mind. Dr. Garner's chilling revelations and Ray's cold indifference echoed relentlessly. Does it matter? As I pulled into our driveway, the sun dipped low, casting elongated shadows across the yard. The house, with its quaint pale blue siding and neatly trimmed hedges, seemed almost mocking in its normalcy. It had always been a sanctuary, but now it felt like a hollow shell, just another illusion crumbling before me. I sat in the car for a few moments, gathering the strength to face the facade that had become my life. The door to our home seemed to loom larger than ever, a barrier between me and the truth I wasn't sure I was ready to confront. Inside, the house was eerily silent. The only sound was the relentless ticking of the clock, magnifying the stillness. I called out tentatively, "Ray?" But the silence swallowed my voice. Relief washed over me. Perhaps he was out for a walk or working in the garage. I seized the brief reprieve, needing a moment to collect myself. I headed to the kitchen, my mind preoccupied as I filled the kettle. Routine was a comfort, and sorting through the mail was a distraction. As I reached for the stack of envelopes, an unfamiliar letter caught my eye. It was addressed to Ray, lacking a return address and sealed with a meticulousness that sent a shiver down my spine. My curiosity battled with my sense of privacy, but Dr. Garner's warnings and Ray's indifferent attitude pushed me to investigate. With trembling hands, I tore open the envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper, its message sending a jolt through me. "Ray, the money isn't enough. We had a deal. If you don't follow through, I'll make sure Stella knows everything." No signature, just a stark threat. The implication was clear: someone was blackmailing Ray, using me as leverage. The mention of a deal was ominous. What had Ray agreed to? What was he hiding? My heart raced, the weight of the letter's contents pressing heavily on my chest. Was this connected to the fraud Dr. Garner mentioned, or was there something darker at play? The man I loved was entangled in deceit so profound that it warranted blackmail. A sudden creak from the front door made me freeze. I quickly stuffed the letter back into the envelope and shoved it into the drawer with the rest of the mail just as Ray walked in. His appearance, tired, hunched, and hollow-eyed, contrasted sharply with the unreadable expression that crossed his face upon seeing me. "Hey," he said, his tone carefully neutral. "What are you doing?" I forced a smile, masking my unease. "Just going through the mail." "How was your walk?" Ray's gaze lingered on the pile of mail, a flicker of suspicion crossing his face. "It was fine. Needed some air." "You?" "I'm okay," I lied, the words feeling heavy on my tongue. I wasn't ready to confront him, not yet. I needed more answers. Ray's eyes remained fixed on the mail. "Anything interesting?" My heart skipped a beat, but I shook my head. "No, just the usual. Bills and junk." He seemed to accept my response and headed for the bathroom. I watched him go, the tension between us like a taut wire, ready to snap. I knew I couldn't maintain this facade for long. The letter confirmed my fears: Ray was hiding something. It was only a matter of time before everything unraveled. As soon as I heard the shower running, I slipped out of the house, my heart pounding with a mix of fear and determination. I needed to be alone, to think clearly. I drove to a nearby park, finding solace under the broad branches of an old oak tree. The cool evening air did little to soothe the tumult inside me. Lost in thought, I barely noticed Sarah approaching until she sat down beside me, concern etched in her features. "Stella? What are you doing out here?" she asked, her voice laced with worry. "You look like you've seen a ghost." I managed a weak smile. "I just needed some air." Sarah's gaze was penetrating. "I know you better than that. Something's wrong." "What's going on?" The weight of the day's revelations pressed heavily on me. I hesitated, then decided I needed to confide in her. "It's Ray," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "I found out some things today. Things I never expected." Sarah's expression shifted to one of deeper concern. "What kind of things?" I took a deep breath, then laid it all bare. "He has a criminal past, fraud, deception. And now, I found a letter. Someone's blackmailing him. They're threatening to expose everything if he doesn't come up with more money." Sarah's eyes widened in shock. "Ray? But he's always been so reserved." I nodded, tears threatening to spill. "I know. That's what makes it so hard to believe. I don't know what to do. I don't even know who he is anymore." Sarah squeezed my hand, her touch a firm anchor in the storm. "Stella, you can't face this alone. You need to confront him, demand the truth. And if he won't give it to you, protect yourself. Whatever he's involved in, it's not worth your safety or sanity." Her words gave me a sliver of strength. I wiped away a tear and nodded. "You're right. I can't keep pretending everything's okay." We sat in silence, the weight of the situation heavy between us. Finally, Sarah spoke, her voice resolute. "You're stronger than you think. Don't let him drag you down. You deserve better." I nodded, her support fortifying me. "I'll talk to him tonight. I can't keep living like this." As the sun set, casting a golden hue over the park, I knew I had reached a turning point. I needed to face Ray, to demand the answers I so desperately needed. The time for avoidance was over. Returning home, the house was dimly lit, with only the faint glow of the living room lamp casting long shadows. Ray was on the couch, his eyes fixed on the TV, though he seemed lost in thought rather than actually watching. Taking a deep breath, I stepped into the room. Ray looked up, his gaze searching mine. The silence between us was thick, laden with unspoken words. "Ray, we need to talk," I said firmly. Ray turned off the TV, the room falling into stark silence. He leaned back, his posture tense, as if bracing for impact. "What do you want to talk about?" he asked, his voice controlled but strained. I took a seat opposite him, my emotions simmering just beneath the surface. "I found a letter today. Someone is blackmailing you." Ray's expression was inscrutable, but a fleeting shadow of fear, or perhaps anger, crossed his face. He leaned forward slightly, his voice low. "You went through my mail?" "I didn't snoop," I said quickly. "It was mixed in with the other letters. When I saw what it said, I had to know." Ray sighed, rubbing his temples in frustration. "Stella, No," I interrupted, my voice firm. "I need the truth. Who is this person? What are they threatening you with? And what have you done?" He hesitated, glancing around the room as if seeking an escape. Finally, he met my gaze, his defenses crumbling. "Her name is Lauren," he said quietly. "We worked together a few years ago. She discovered my past, the fraud, and she used it to blackmail me. I thought I could control it, pay her off and make her go away. But it never ends." My heart pounded. "And what did she threaten to tell me?" Ray's face was pale, his voice barely a whisper. "It wasn't just about the fraud. There were other things, money I took, lies I told. I didn't want to hurt you. I thought I could shield you from the mess I made." "Shield me?" I echoed, my voice rising in anger. "You've been lying to me for years, Ray. How is that protecting me?" He flinched, pain evident in his eyes. "I'm sorry. I know I failed you. I didn't know how to fix it. I was trapped by my own mistakes." I stood up, unable to stay still. Anger, hurt, and betrayal surged inside me. "You could have told me the truth. We could have faced this together. But now, I don't even know who you are anymore." Ray stood, his voice pleading. "I'm still the man you married. I love you. I made mistakes, but I never stopped loving you." Tears welled up. Love isn't enough when it's built on lies. He took a step toward me, desperation in his eyes. "Please, Stella. I can fix this. I can make it right." I shook my head, stepping back. "I don't think you can. Not this time." For a long moment, we stood there, the distance between us palpable. Ray's shoulders slumped, and the fight seemed to drain from him. "What do you want me to do?" he asked quietly. Taking a deep breath, my heart breaking, I spoke the words that would change everything. "I want you to leave. I need time to think, to figure out what I want." Ray nodded slowly, sorrow etched on his face. "If that's what you want." "It is," I whispered, barely able to hold back my tears. "For now." Ray didn't argue. He simply turned and walked toward the door. As he reached for the handle, he paused and looked back. "I'm sorry, Stella. For everything." I didn't respond. I just watched as he opened the door and stepped outside, the sound of it closing behind him echoing through the empty house. For the first time in a long while, I was alone. That night, lying in bed, I stared at the ceiling, unable to sleep. The events of the day replayed in my mind, each thought more painful than the last. I knew asking Ray to leave was the right decision, but it didn't make it easier. My heart ached with the weight of everything lost: trust, marriage, future. Yet, amid the pain, a flicker of hope emerged. Maybe this was the beginning of something new. A chance to rebuild and rediscover myself, free from lies and deceit. As I closed my eyes, I knew the road ahead would be challenging, filled with hard truths and difficult decisions. But whatever happened, I was determined to face it head-on. For the first time in a long while, I was beginning to see the truth about Ray, my marriage, and myself. And that truth, as painful as it was, would set me free. The days after Ray left were some of the hardest I'd ever faced. The house, once alive with the comforting hum of our daily routines and whispered conversations, now echoed with a silence that felt both stifling and strangely liberating. My footsteps seemed too loud on the hardwood floors, amplifying the emptiness. Everywhere I looked, remnants of him lingered: his jacket on the chair, his favorite mug on the kitchen counter, the wedding photo still hanging in the hallway. It wasn't just the physical traces that weighed on me. It was the emotional fallout, the betrayal hanging in the air like a storm cloud that refused to dissipate. I oscillated between anger, sadness, and an unexpected relief. A heavy burden had been lifted, but it left me feeling raw and exposed, unsure of what to do with this newfound freedom. Sarah's daily check-ins were a lifeline. She brought dinner and made sure I wasn't drowning in my own thoughts. While I valued her company, there were moments when I needed solitude to process the whirlwind of emotions and decide my next steps. One evening, as I sat on the back porch watching the sunset, my phone buzzed. I glanced at the screen and saw a message from Adam, my boss. A flutter of nerves accompanied his name. "Hey Stella, I hope you're doing okay. No rush, but when you're ready to come back to work, we'd love to have you. Take all the time you need. Also, if you ever want to talk, I'm here." I stared at the message, unsure how to respond. Adam had always been kind and supportive, but amid the chaos, I hadn't thought much about him, or work. His message now felt like a beacon of normalcy in a sea of upheaval. It was comforting to know someone cared. Taking a deep breath, I typed a response. "Thank you, Adam. I'm taking things one day at a time, but I think I'll be ready to come back next week. And thank you for the offer to talk. I might take you up on that." I hit send and leaned back in my chair, a mix of anticipation and anxiety stirring inside me. Work would offer a welcome distraction, a way to reclaim some semblance of normalcy, but Adam's message had stirred something deeper, something I wasn't sure I was ready to explore. The following week, returning to the office felt surreal. The place seemed unchanged, yet my life felt like it had shifted irrevocably. My coworkers greeted me with warm smiles and concerned glances, but Adam's presence was the most reassuring. He didn't pry or offer empty platitudes, he simply made sure I had what I needed and allowed me to ease back into work at my own pace. A few days later, after the office had cleared, Adam approached my desk. His expression was gentle, his voice low. "Stella, do you have a few minutes? I was thinking maybe we could grab a coffee. Just talk, if you're up for it." Surprised but not unwilling, I looked up. "I'd like that, Adam. I think I could use the company." We ended up at a small cafe down the street, a place that now felt intimate in a new way. As we settled into a corner table and the barista delivered our drinks, Adam leaned back, his warm, thoughtful gaze easing my tension. "How are you holding up?" he asked softly. I took a sip of my coffee, savoring its warmth before answering. "It's been difficult. Some days are better than others. It feels strange, like I'm still in shock." Adam nodded, his gaze unwavering. "That's understandable. You've been through a lot. It takes time to process. You don't have to have it all figured out right now." I appreciated his patience, the way he listened without rushing me. What I'm struggling with most is figuring out what comes next. My life with Ray is over, but I'm still here. I don't know what to do with that. Adam's smile was gentle. "You don't have to know right away. Sometimes, it's about taking things one step at a time. You'll figure it out. You're stronger than you think." His words resonated deeply. For the first time in weeks, I felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe I didn't need all the answers immediately. We talked for a while longer, about work, life, and everything in between. I found myself relaxing in his presence, enjoying the easy conversation and the comfort of his company. There was something reassuring about being with Adam, a sense of safety and possibility. As we left the cafe, Adam walked me to my car. The night air was crisp, and the streetlights cast a soft glow. He paused, turning to face me. "Stella," he began, his tone sincere, "I want you to know I'm here for you. Not just as your boss, but as a friend. And if you ever need more than that, I'm open to that too." His words caught me off guard, stirring a mix of uncertainty, excitement, and a hint of something deeper. I didn't know what the future held, but in that moment with Adam, I realized I didn't have to face it alone. "Thank you, Adam," I said softly, meeting his gaze. "I'm not sure what I'm ready for yet, but I appreciate that." "I appreciate you." He smiled, a warm, genuine smile that made me feel safe. "No pressure, Stella. Just know that I'm here, whatever you need." As we stood there, hand in hand, the air between us felt charged with possibility. As I drove home, I felt that maybe, just maybe, this was the start of something new, something that could help heal the wounds of the past and lead me toward a future I hadn't dared to imagine. In the weeks that followed, I began to reclaim my sense of self. Work kept me grounded, and the evenings, no longer consumed by the haunting silence, were filled with activities that brought me peace, reading, gardening, and walks through the neighborhood. Then there was Adam. True to his word, he was there for me in whatever capacity I needed. Our friendship deepened with each coffee date and shared laugh. There were no expectations, just a connection growing stronger each day. One evening, as we sat on a park bench overlooking the city skyline, Adam asked, "Stella, can I ask you something?" "Of course," I replied. He hesitated, then said, "What do you want out of life? After everything that's happened, what's next for you?" The question surprised me, and I found myself reflecting deeply before answering. Honestly, I'm not entirely sure. For so long, my life revolved around Ray and our marriage. But now, I just want to find happiness again. To live for myself and discover who I am without the weight of the past. Adam nodded, his understanding evident. "That makes sense. You deserve to find happiness, whatever that looks like for you." I smiled, touched by his words. "What about you, Adam? What do you want?" He looked out at the city, thoughtful. "I want the same, to find happiness, to be with someone who makes life feel full. Someone who understands me and whom I can share everything with." The atmosphere between us shifted, charged with potential. I met his gaze, and for a moment, neither of us spoke. The connection was undeniable but fragile, like a delicate thread. "Adam," I began softly, "I really appreciate everything you've done for me. I value our friendship so much. But I'm scared. Scared of moving too fast, of getting hurt again." He reached out, gently taking my hand. "I understand, Stella. I'm not asking for anything more than what you're ready to give. We can take things one day at a time, no rush. Just see where it goes." His words eased my fear, replacing it with cautious hope. Maybe I wasn't ready to dive into a new relationship, but I was willing to take that first step and see where it led. I squeezed his hand, a small smile on my lips. "One day at a time sounds good to me." Adam smiled back, his eyes warm and understanding. "Then that's what we'll do." As we sat there, hand in hand, watching the city lights flicker, I felt a quiet resolve. This was a new beginning, not just for me, but for whatever this was between Adam and me. The past, with its pain and deception, would no longer define me. I had survived it and was ready to move forward, one step at a time. That night, as I climbed into bed, I felt lighter and more at peace than I had in a long time. The house didn't seem so empty anymore. It felt like a space where I could rebuild, where I could create a life that was truly mine. In the mirror, I saw a woman who had endured and emerged stronger. I had rediscovered my worth and faced the future with quiet determination. The fear that had gripped me was loosening, replaced by a resolve to live life on my own terms. As I closed my eyes that night, I knew tomorrow might bring new challenges, but I wasn't alone. I had friends who cared, a fulfilling job, and someone like Adam, willing to walk this new path with me, no matter how long it took. For the first time in what felt like forever, I fell asleep with a sense of hope. It was a new beginning, a chance to write a new story, one filled with possibility, healing, and maybe, just maybe, love. Months later, as I tended to my garden, watching the flowers bloom in the late afternoon sun, I realized how far I had come. The nightmares of the past had faded, replaced by a life that felt vibrant and full. I had found a new rhythm and a renewed sense of purpose. Adam and I were still taking things one day at a time, but our bond had deepened. He was patient, understanding, and kind, everything Ray wasn't. In him, I had found not just a friend but a partner, someone who made me believe in the possibility of real love again. As I knelt to care for the flowers, Adam's voice called out from the back porch. "Stella, do you need any help?" I turned to see him smiling and felt warmth spread through me. "No, I've got it. But thank you." He joined me in the garden, and together, we worked in comfortable silence. In that moment, I knew that this simple, quiet life was exactly what I had been searching for. It wasn't perfect, but it was mine. And that was enough. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden glow, I realized that this was the beginning of something beautiful, a new chapter filled with hope, love, and endless possibilities. For the first time in a long time, I felt truly, completely happy. If you like this story, please subscribe, like, click the bell, and leave a comment. Thank you in advance.